Greetings and welcome to Austin, Texas Gardening. Today we're going to be taking a look at how I built this large winter garden raised bed in my backyard. This project was a ton of fun. I planted 36 cabbages in total, 13 broccoli plants, and a rosemary plant. And it was also a ton of work. It was really surprising how much everything weighed and how much everything costed. You could probably do this cheaper than me. I spent about $1,000 on this whole project. Let me show you how I did it. So the first step with all of this is going to be removing the turf. Now, I bought my home about a month ago, and I really wish I had done this right when I moved in, but my wife and I wanted to take time to plan exactly where we wanted all the things in our backyard. And so by the time I got around to doing this, I discovered that not only had the grass roots kind of set into the area below the turf, but that the soil below the turf was also clay soil, like my last home. So this was incredibly difficult. I removed about a cubic yard in total, maybe about 2, 3, 4 inches down, and so it was probably about 2,000 pounds. You can see that soil here, and I use the word soil lightly. A lot of it is clay, so you might have a better experience depending on where in Texas you're doing this, or wherever you're doing this, but here we have this nasty soil.
All right, so we finished removing our soil, and we have all of our building materials here. For our raised bed, I'm going to be using these pine boards that I got. These are 2x12s that were 10 feet long, and I had them cut into 5-foot sections so they'd be a little easier to work with. So, for the record, before we get started talking about this anymore, I wanted to explain why I chose this location. My backyard isn't huge, but it's, I think, bigger than most. And you can see my house over there is casting a shadow. Well, in the winter, the sun rises over there and kind of runs along that southern border. That's obviously the south. And so my house casts a shadow which gets longer and longer as we approach December 21st. And this is the only spot of the yard that's in the sunlight all times a year. So that's why I chose it. With that, I went through, and as you saw in that time lapse there, I pulled up as much as I could from this bed, and I don't want any grass. Now this is Bermuda grass, so it's super easy to infiltrate raised beds. And you can kind of see there's still a little bit of grass there. I think we'll be fine. Like these grass roots here, I don't know if they could come back, but we're gonna go ahead and just, build the raised bed on top of it. And I dug out a little bit of a section here to prevent the grass roots from getting in. I think the grass has a better chance of growing back when it's coming from this rather than coming from, a stray root or something over there. So I have these big bags of mountain granite, and we're gonna go ahead and unload these bags that I've laid out here. I think I got 20 in total, and I forget the volume of these bags. They're 0.5 cubic foot bags. I don't know if you can see that in the light there, but they're 0.5 cubic foot bags. We're gonna take these bags and get the edges here filled in, and then we will start getting things assembled. And now that it's evening, I just wanted to kind of demonstrate what I meant when I said choosing a location for your raised bed. So it's almost sunset, it's about an hour out. And you can see the sun over here is peeking right over my neighbor's house and about to set over there in the southwest. And this is the shade that's in my backyard. So it's a ton of shade. It's great for entertaining. And in the summer, obviously most of the day, the sun will kind of go straight overhead east to west, and most of the day this will be in the sunlight. But right now, since we have shorter hours in the winter and I want to plant some brassicas and cabbage, I wanted my raised bed to be in an area where it was going to get a good amount of sunlight year round. So I'm not going to put down this granite today. I'm going to wait till tomorrow to do that, and then we will start assembling our raised bed and filling it with some soil. And now with all our granite laid, our raised bed zone looks amazing. I totally underestimated the amount of granite that would be needed for this path. I was anticipating that I would only need maybe about 20 bags of this Vigorio mountain granite mix here, which they're 0.5 bags, they're about 40 pounds a piece, and I wound up needing 50 in total. So that was 2,000 pounds of mountain granite for a total of about 25 cubic feet, which is about 1 cubic yard of granite. And it looks lovely. I think our raised bed zone here is going to do great. So that's a 30-foot landing strip, 4 feet wide, and we're going to do a 3-foot raised bed with just 20 feet of length, and then maybe make some raised beds out of other material in the future. But for right now, let's get started with our pine and cedar. So sundown will be here pretty soon, but I wanted to take a chance today to explain what I want to do with the assembly of my raised bed wood. And I have my pine boards here and my cedar 4x4 there. And what I intend to do is take my 4x4 and just kind of line it up so that it's a corner piece post for each one of these 5-foot long pieces of boards. So the cedar boards are 2x12s, which isn't actually 2 inches by 12. It's more about like 1 3/4 by 11.5. And so this piece of wood here, I had two 8-foot long cedar boards, which I cut into fifths. So this is 19 inches long, and I'm going to kind of situate it as you see here, where the bottom is flush with the bottom and the top is almost all the way to the top. It leaves a little bit of give just so I can fill the top up with soil and you won't have to see these cedar posts when we're finished. So I'm going to get started with assembly and finish up tomorrow to explain more of what I intend to do with these cedar 4x4 joint pieces and my pine boards. So now we're assembling the actual frame of the raised bed, and I'm using these Wood Fasteners. They look kind of like this. They have these weird hex-shaped screws, and the reason I'm using these is because I couldn't find quality 3-inch screws, which we need for our boards. If you kind of look down here, you can see what I'm doing. I'm using 3 of these here, here, and here to anchor my pine board into my cedar 4x4, and I have 2 rows of these that are all lined up here. And the way I'm kind of going about this is I'm positioning my boards on the edge here on the entire 4x4, and then for each one of these posts every 5 feet, kind of in the middle where there's about 1 inch that's getting cemented in with the wood fasteners. And so one of the issues I run into is they tried to cut these boards perfectly even, but you can see they're not perfectly even. Like these 2 lines here are lined up, but when they cut these to 5 feet, it was kind of 5 feet and 1/4 centimeter, where everything's not totally flush. If you run into this problem, it shouldn't be a huge issue. I'm going to try to work around it, but let's continue getting this set up. And just to show how these fasteners work, come over here and grab some. And I've got my drill here. And they're just really simple tools. You just take your wood fastener, and obviously you could pre-float these with a drill bit, but I just go ahead and start them like this. They go in super easy. Just like that. Super easy. So we're going to use 3 on each one of these anchors here, and then once I've done both long ends, we'll fasten the 3-foot short end pieces. Look at this line where these boards meet when I try to pick it up. See how they open up like that? I don't want that. And so just to reinforce them a little bit, I've got this additional 2x12, and I went ahead and got 6 of these. And I'm just going to line it up and put some fasteners in there to just really reinforce the board. Just like this. Now with those in, I'm going to go ahead and put 2 more of these there and over there. So we've got our additional 2, this is kind of a mouthful. We have our additional support pieces here. They're 2x12s, so they're 2 feet long. Well, 22.5 inches to be exact. And so I'm going to stand this up, and you'll see it has a little bit more support now. Yeah, moves up a lot easier. Charity, if you come over to this other side, you can see these nails, these screws, I mean, are barely poking through, like down here. So you're going to want to be careful. These are 3 1/8 inch screws, and they went into 2 2x12s. So there's a little bit sticking out, which is why on the other side here, I tried to put the screws, the anchors, lower in the raised bed. I wouldn't want them up here because then you'd have a little sharp screw sticking out right where you're going to be trying to work with the soil. So with that, I'm going to assemble our other long wall piece.
So with this piece here, I basically wanted to just kind of explain that it's okay if not everything is perfectly even. You can see when I zoom in here, some of these cracks and crevices aren't lined up 100%, and that really bothered me at first, but I found that once everything was anchored and with supports, those 2x12 supports that were 22 inches long, things fit together really well. So I'm just using my lower board here to level this next wall that I'm going to be building, and let's get our fasteners put in. Now that I've assembled both 20-foot long walls, I've put a chair there to prevent them from tipping over, and we're going to fix our 3-foot long wall onto the end pieces of our boards here. And it's okay if they're not 100% completely level. I noticed they were bowed in a little bit, but once I filled them with soil, they were looking a lot more straight. So let's go ahead and get this fixed on. Now, this part was very difficult because fixing these boards on, I had to kind of position the walls so that the fasteners would go in correctly. And you can see here, I'm putting fasteners into both the 4x4 and the wall pieces. These end pieces, I imagine, are going to be very stressed by the weight of all the soil that's going into this planter. It's probably going to be about 1,500 to 2,000 pounds in total for about 4 cubic yards of topsoil. And I obviously don't want these boards to give way, and so it was really difficult getting this other wall adjusted. For some reason, it just didn't want to sink in here, but once I got some fasteners into the 4x4, I noticed that it looked like it was attached the way I was anticipating. I also wanted to mention that even though I'm doing most of this by myself, this is totally not a one-man job. Positioning those 2 walls was extremely difficult because they probably weighed 300 to 400 pounds apiece, and were trying to tip over and give way, but as you can see here, I eventually did get everything attached. And this is the final result. The planter looks amazing. It's great, and you can see here it looks a lot more level once we have both wall pieces fixed onto both ends. We've got that granite below for drainage, and the posts look awesome. I can totally see why most people recommend doing 4 feet by 8 feet, because 20 feet by 3 feet was just really difficult with those long walls. But now that it's built, we're going to take this straw blanket, which we're going to put down to help with drainage and prevent some of the mud from seeping out of the bottom. So let's get that set. So there's all sorts of different ways you can fill these beds. I've seen people put old firewood in here, rotting logs for the first, maybe foot or so of the bed, straw and hay, basically something that's decomposable so that you don't have to go out of your way to fill up the bed with good quality gardening soil. You can just let organic material decompose and then use that. I considered that as an option, but in the end, I just decided to fill it up with as much raised bed soil as I had, in addition to this little straw blanket.
Now the last part is filling the bed with soil. So I've lined up all of our raised bed bags here, and I'm just going to go ahead, go out and cut them.
This part was also really difficult for a couple of different reasons. So these bags, emptying them out, the only way to do it is kind of lifting them up by the bottom, and it just puts a lot of strain on my lower back. I'm not sure that I would recommend doing this. And also, just for a cost perspective, and we'll talk more about costs down the line, these were $8 a bag, and I bought 50 of them, so it was about $400 on soil alone. If I had gone to a soil distributor, I probably could have paid half the price to have somebody with a flatbed come dump a whole bunch in my driveway, and the same goes for the granite. I paid about $250 for the granite. If I had gone to a rock quarry, I could have gotten a cubic yard for about 120 bucks and saved a total of about $350, so you might want to consider that. I chose not to do that because I was a little impatient and just wanted to get my garden bed built right away. And the other part was I just moved into my new home, and I really didn't want to tempt my HOA by putting a whole bunch of junk in my driveway. So I just did it this way. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it, but it did work out for me pretty well. And this is our final result. Raised bed turned out awesome. What you see in that bed there is 50 bags, 2 cubic feet each, so 100 cubic feet of raised bed soil, and that's about 3.7 cubic yards. And I decided to just top it off with a little bit of mulch and a couple of additional bags just to flesh out the areas that weren't totally filled, so maybe about 110 cubic feet in total. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I decided to grow cabbage and some broccoli this year, so I planted 36 cabbages and 13 broccoli plants. Now, each one of these plants is supposed to have about 1 cubic feet to grow in. So while they are 6 to 8 inches apart, they each have 1 cubic feet, of course, reminding everybody that the planter is 3 feet long or 3 feet wide, I suppose, 20 feet long and then 22 inches deep. These plants are probably about 20 inches vertical space to put down their roots. So the last two really important metrics that we need to discuss are the cost of this project and the weight of my building materials. When I had set out to work on this, I was only expecting to spend $300 or $400, but I discovered really quickly it was going to cost more than that. Lumber alone was about $300, so $185 for the pine boards, $85 for the cedar, and $25 for the wood fasteners, but I really overspent on soil. As I mentioned previously in the video, if you go to a rock quarry or a soil distributor, you could probably get the equivalent amount of soil for $200 or the equivalent amount of granite for $120, but I spent a total of $650 on both. So that was a total of $985 for the project. Again, I don't really think this is an inappropriate way of going about building something like this, but I would recommend just starting with a smaller raised bed. You'd spend probably 60% of my total cost, so maybe close to about $550, $600, and that would be a lot easier, especially in terms of weight. So the weight for this project, the lumber alone weighed about 800 pounds, so those long 20-foot walls could have been 300-400 a piece. And then the raised bed soil was about 1,500 pounds. The granite was 2,000 pounds for a total of 4,300 pounds. That's not even considering the 1 cubic yard of turf and clay, which I initially removed to get this project started. This project was really enjoyable and a lot of fun. I'm really glad that I got to build this out, and I think it looks lovely in my backyard. I'm going to put some plants and containers on the edges of this container where I have that extra granite. And I think our cabbages and broccoli are going to do great. They're going to get a lot of sun this winter, and I'm very excited to see how this winter garden goes. I hope this project was inspiring and gave you some ideas about what you might want to build in your own backyard. Thanks again for watching Austin, Texas Gardening.